This white supremacist terrorist group, Patriot Front, running around in Washington, D.C., talking about reclaiming America. Wonder who they're trying to reclaim America from. It's odd. Maybe someone should pay attention to these types of things, because whatever they're talking about must be pretty wild and pretty dangerous. There's 150 of them, by the way, that walked around, and they were walking around with their shields out, their flags up. Looks like variations of the American flag. That looks like that's something we shouldn't be doing if you're real patriots, but who cares? They're white guys. So by the way, the disruption was happening, but there were still hecklers hanging out, not willing to buy this whole fearful approach and energy that these guys are trying to put out. Here's some of the heckling that actually was pretty funny.
Show your face.
I would love to speak of our nation's great history, of our people's tireless accomplishments, but I cannot.
Wear Walmart khakis.
I would love to speak of the will of the European race that made America. There will be no memory of America to continue.
Your mom hates you.
No history to fight for.
You were the losers of your high school class.
We have gone out into this once
You're a bunch of
great country.
I kind of love his bike too. Looked like one of those electric bikes, but he's still pedaling hard from it.
So like plan on being there. Just whoever was on the bike just rocked up and was like, this is fun. Let me say some stuff to them.
Yeah, he rolled by probably a Subway, had his sandwich, and he's like, you know what? Looks like there's a bit of a group going here. I think I have some things to say. So true Americans fighting right back against these patriots that want to go ahead and hurt folks. So still, I asked myself the question, or a lot of people ask themselves this question: how is it we're looking at these white supremacist terrorists walking around our streets, talking about reclaiming America, covering up their faces to keep their identities hidden? How do we get to this point where this is so normalized? Where there's folks from politicians to pundits that like to push this types of thing as a normal thing, or anyone who pushes back on it as being radical, crazy, and hateful. One of those folks is Tomi Lahren. And after I saw this morning, and also coupled with this, these types of things always work in coordination. Watch what she said.
Under the guise of we've had tragedies happen under lone wolf terrorists and then label it all white supremacy, that's a scapegoat.
Yeah, well, this is what they have been doing and doing effectively, especially in the midterms that we just saw. Biden, his entire administration, Democrats as a whole, have been able to use this ultra mega white supremacist threats to democracy. They've been able to use this. It is no coincidence they echo this every time they get a chance, because they want those independent, those Democrat, and especially those liberal voters to actually believe the biggest threat we face is white supremacy, because they can't really solve that. Right? You can solve the border crisis. That's solvable. Donald Trump did it. You can solve national security to an extent. You can't solve this boogeyman called white supremacy, and that's why they continue to echo it, because they don't actually have to do anything.
You don't have to believe what you see in the streets, Burbank. You can just believe what Tomi Lahren and politicians say on TV all the time about how anybody's pushback against terrorists, specifically these white supremacist terrorists, is on the wrong side of it, and we can't fix it. I think that's a very illustrative point as from their approach. We can't fix it, especially when you don't care to.
I think Tomi Lahren, Jayar, wears too much self-tanner for someone running game for white supremacists. I think that's wrong. I don't think she should be allowed to use it. She defends white supremacists in this country. That's how I feel. And what she says there is hilarious, because if you replace white supremacy with woke mind virus, it's a pretty solid argument for why the right obsessing over the woke mind virus is ridiculous when it comes to American politics today.
It's the approach that they'll take, and look, apparently it's working, because we'll still have people who don't even be able, which we'll go to in a minute later on in the show, can't even define what woke is, but they definitely have a vehement aggression against it. It's just the way these things are. So of course, when you see these folks on the streets, it's either, hey, that's not really what you're seeing, or as we see folks that were responding to this, those weren't really white supremacist terrorists. These are people trying to produce some kind of narrative. On Reddit, there's some conspiracy theories that were floating around though. On the Reddit forum for conspiracy theories, ironically, one user said those taking part in the march, quote, look suspiciously like feds and all a little too uniform to me to be authentic. So apparently you have to be a little bit more disheveled and not in uniform if you're some white supremacist. There's more. I said the fact that there's no more morbidly obese people among the crowd is a dead giveaway that there are trained feds, is what another person wrote. You know how I know they're feds? No beer bellies. Not saying every gun-loving American has one, but statistically, there should be a couple at least, right? I mean, walk around with beer bellies and stuff. I remember they said the same thing about women who actually want reproductive rights for all folks who can have babies, right? They want to be able to have their rights, but then they said, oh, you guys are too fat and ugly anyway. How are you getting pregnant in the first place? Apparently the fat and ugly ones are also part of these Patriot Front groups and all those folks, but if you don't see them, that means they're not real. Just grasping at anything that they can. There's more though. Someone else was tweeting this out. Do you think that the FBI is just going to let a neo-Nazi group pile into the back of a Penske rental truck and drive up the highway? This is a covert FBI sting operation to indoctrinate dummies. Oh, there's some operation to indoctrinate dummies, and I think this guy got wrapped up in it. Ask yourself why they would want them to freely roam across the country. I'm not sure who we're asking, and also who the they is, because there was the Patriot Front folks jumping in back of vans, parading across the country, doing what they did over the weekend. One more, Burbank. Sheepdog Frank. More white supremacy means more budget justification with zero risk. More excuses to crack down on citizens in the name of fighting white supremacy. Quote, white supremacy, as he pointed there, because apparently it doesn't exist. Again, this is the #1 domestic terror group, white supremacists and neo-Nazis. They're looking to inflict more pain and violence on just about any other American that isn't the one marching along with them. And these guys are talking about how there's some kind of a budget justification for doing this. This is the problem. Our federal government is talking about it, but what are they doing about it? This is the point, to try and keep them from ever going that route and saying that it just doesn't exist.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, talking about it but not doing anything about it. Because why were they allowed to just march around Washington, D.C. openly saying they're white supremacists? The idea that everyone who does something like this is a Fed is so annoying coming from members of the right wing. And then to say, now we're going to have a crackdown on ordinary citizens under the name of white supremacy. It's like, were you not around for any of the Black Lives Matter protests? And to say crack down on ordinary citizens when the far right in this country is all for increasing the police budget and loving on the police. Like, there's so much cognitive dissonance between folks saying, oh, well, they don't look like us. We don't look like that. Okay, so you're saying you know what white supremacists look like and you identify with them, you know that they have beer bellies? Like, it just doesn't add up. You can't say there's not real white supremacists and say, no, I know them, they don't look like that. Also, Hitler was like super down for aesthetics and like wanted everybody to match. Like, it turns out eugenicists care a lot about how people look. So the uniform thing is pretty standard for people deep into like fascist ideology. So a lot of what they're saying doesn't really track. We can learn a lot about the country from Reddit threads, probably more than reading mainstream news.
Most likely, it goes down to the same questions. Ask who, what, when, where, why, and how. Just ask folks this as they go through it, and they'll eventually get to a brick wall. Ask it with all earnest interest in what it is that they might be saying, without just, well, what do you think? Ask them, see if they get there.